Hello, my gorgeous people. Grace here, Bicadonia, and this is the glamorous way that my motorcycling adventure to Cambodia started off. That's right, sleeping in the airport at Suvarnabhumi in Bangkok. This is because there are not many flights to Phnom Penh at the moment, and they all leave really early in the morning, or at least the ones that I can afford. So, in order to make my connection from Chiang Mai, it meant I had to fly from Chiang Mai the night before. Of course, I am much too cheap to pay for a night in a hotel when there are perfectly good public seats available in the airport to sleep on, so that's exactly what I did. The next morning, the sun rose over a slightly smoggy Bangkok, and I was off to Phnom Penh in another nearly empty flight. Despite all the new COVID regulations, flying into Cambodia now is way more streamlined and stress free than it used to be, simply because there's not that many people going with you. The visa regulations have returned to normal with tourist visa on arrival for many countries, and there are no big queues to block your progress. So, yeah, if you're thinking about it, I reckon there's no better time to take a holiday in Cambodia. Anyway, obviously, the first thing I did when I landed was go and see my friends who've been looking after my gear and my motorcycle while I've been gone these 2 years. And I cannot begin to describe my gratitude towards these kind people who have had my back through this whole pandemic. I thought I was going away for 1 week when I left Cambodia, and 2 years later, I come back and my motorbike is waiting for me and my gear is waiting for me. Honestly, this is the kind of thing that restores your faith in humanity. And here we go, the moment of truth. There, right down the back of my friend's workshop. Is it? Can it be? Yes, it is indeed. It is the most beautiful motorcycle in the world. My beastie, my KTM 690 Enduro, intact and patiently waiting for me. I may have been a little bit teary. What a moment. I have been waiting literally years for this. So this is my friend Check's workshop, and although it is a tiny space, he has so kindly kept my motorbike safe and sound tucked right up the back for 2 years now. Every day, the boys have to pull out a whole bunch of motorcycles and park them in front of the shop just to make space to work. Czech is also a super talented mechanic. When I first came to Cambodia, I knew that my rocker arm bearing was going because I could hear the change in the engine note. But I didn't expect that Czech would know that too. Anyway, within 5 minutes, he had diagnosed the problem without me having to explain in Khmer, which I obviously don't have the language skills to do. So, when your motorcycle has been sitting for 2 years, as mine has, it is a huge relief to have the assistance of someone who understands the implications of that and knows how to fix everything. I rocked up in Cambodia with brand new air and fuel filters from Googletech, and so we set about swapping out all the fluids that remained in the bike and putting in those new filters. Air up the tyres, check that the battery is holding charge, and check over basically everything. A tiny bit of oil in the spark plug hole to make sure that there's lubrication in the engine, and start her up. What a feeling hearing that big single rattle into life. But that's not all. It wasn't just about getting the bike running. I've been sitting around for 2 years thinking about my bike as well and thinking about my setup. And I've decided that I want to go rackless and I want to make everything a whole lot lighter. So we pulled the racks off the rear of the bike and put on the carbon fiber heat shield that is hopefully going to stop my stock exhaust from melting the hell out of any luggage I put on the bike. Now, this was no sweat because, as you can see, we were basically disassembling the bike anyway, removing the rear fuel tank completely in order to make sure that we had everything completely cleaned out before we restarted the bike. In the process, Czech noticed that my rear plastics were completely cracked through, and so he went down the street to see his mates who specialise in fixing your plastics with nothing but a modified soldering iron. I don't know how much KTM charges to replace this part, and I am super keen to never find out. We then did a complete renovation of the tail tidy because it became pretty obvious that without the racks, my number plate was otherwise not going to stay on for very long at all. So everything was going absolutely fabulously with the bike until we got to the rear suspension. And then we noticed that the bike was really bouncy. Like, really, really bouncy, like pogo stick bouncy. And now I'm sure that's heaps of fun if you have a pogo stick, but if you have white power suspension, that is absolutely not the kind of performance we are looking for. So, sure enough, no real surprises. After 2 years sitting dormant, not being ridden, the seals had dried out. The seals had failed, the oil had all leaked out of the shock. The whole shock needs to be refurbished. So I had a little bit of a sinking feeling because I've had to get this rear shock refurbished one time before, and that was at about 70,000 kilometers in Chiang Mai in Thailand, and that was a major headache. Most of the workshops in Chiang Mai wouldn't touch the job. They did not want anything to do with my white power suspension. It wasn't their normal work, and they simply weren't interested. When I found a specialist shop that would do the job, they took about a week. It was really expensive, and when I finally got my bike back, they hadn't bolted the auxiliary fuel tank back on again properly. So when I went to ride along the highway, I basically ended up with 14 litres of fuel in my lap. So that was suboptimal. And I had this sinking feeling, as I imagined, being stuck in Phnom Penh, waiting for parts, waiting for specialist labour. I thought maybe we can't find a specialist who'll do it. I looked at Czech and I said, "Can you fix it?" And he said to me, "Yes." I said to him, "How long will it take?" And he said, "Oh, maybe one day." So here's to being in the right workshop at the right time. Because the bottom line is, you're not going to manage to ride around the world without ever having any major mechanical problems. But the thing that you come to be appreciative of and to be grateful for is that when you do have those problems, you have access to the parts, to the expertise, and the specialist equipment that you need to fix the problem. Now, you might wonder what else I'm doing with myself in Phnom Penh right now, especially as I wait for that shock to be fixed up. And I can tell you I am on a mission. Well, I could tell you about the mission I'm on, except I'm absolutely exhausted. When you travel in a foreign country and you first arrive, your brain is constantly in overdrive, just taking in all the new stimuli, the new language, trying to understand how everything works, trying not to mess up in some stupid way. And you don't even realize that every moment, even when you think you're not doing anything, your brain is just madly processing information. And it's exhausting. You end up absolutely drained at the end of each day. And so, having said that, I'm going to tell you about my other mission in the morning because I am exhausted and I'm going to sleep.